This week in Keep Creating Abstract Art, we're exploring contrast, and we're doing that in a really cool way with some specific homework. So in class, people created different marks on a sheet of paper, and we ended up having probably like 40 or 50 of these sheets of paper all over the floor of the studio. They were totally different. Each one was completely unique. And then each one of us was charged with picking up like 6 or 7 sheets and taking the sheet home and creating marks that contrast with what we see here. There's an option to also take it a little further and create some art that maintains the shape. Look at that, that's a bee that maintains the shape. You can't totally cover it up, you can cover it a little bit, but you could make only marks that contrast against it, or you could take it further, take the piece further. Okay, so I just wanted to show you how I might do this exercise. I think that could be helpful when you sit down with your sheets of paper and wonder, what the heck am I doing? So let me show you what I've got with me. I've brought into our recording room some of my sketching markers. Those are black. I've got my whole little popsicle pouch of, oh, I think I need a bigger one, color pencils and little like neon markers, a whole selection of them. Got a glue stick and some scissors. I made a color copy of the artwork of the mark that I picked up off the floor. So I've got the original and I've got a color copy. And first thing I can do, oh, actually, and I also have some paints, just like we have in class, the 3 primaries and a black and a white. Got a cup of water, and I've got palette knife and a big brush that I totally chose at random. I don't have an idea yet of what I'm going to do. And that's how I would expect you to do this assignment as well. So let me show you how I'm going to begin. I'm going to flip on my overhead camera. Okay, so I make some space for myself. My paints over here so that I can reach them. And I've got my abstract studio journal. I'm going to adjust this camera really quick so y'all can see me and my work a little better. Okay, so I've got my studio journal, which I shared a little bit in class. I'm going to work in this studio journal. First thing I'm going to do is something that we did in class yesterday, which is where we talked about the fact that for me to contrast this mark, I first need to observe this mark because I need to know what I'm going to contrast against, what I'm working against. So I'm going to first make some observations of that mark. And I'm going to note them in my studio journal. It's a bright, what I would call a bright blue, right? It's not muddy or murky. It's curvy on one side, or actually on like 1, 2, it's like curvy on 3 sides. And I'm noting these things down. Has about half white space, right? All of this stuff, white space. And then about half of it is blue, is the shape. It also has this one side is like a hard side. Feels straight. Okay. So I can look at it from different angles, right? Like if I hold it like this, that straight side might be more apparent to me than this loopy side that I see when I hold it like this. So I'm going to think about what I'm going to do with this. I'm also going to note that the shape looks like the letter B. And I'm just noting things down. And also I want to note that no part of the shape touches the sides of the paper. So as I'm observing, I'm noticing new things. It's important to set apart this time to observe because you're going to notice more as you look. Now I'm going to put it aside. And I'm going to use this copy as a background here. I don't want to get stuff all over this mat here. I'm going to first make a decision, I think, about whether I want to cover it or not. A part of me really, I'm just thinking out loud here, part of me really wants to cover some of this. I'm going to play around a little first. So one thing I want to do is decide whether I want to keep this bright blue or if I want to, and sort of work against it, or if I want to work with it a little bit. I think what I want to do is come against it a little bit with something even, like I'm working with it, but also bring out some of that brightness. And I don't want to really modify the shape. I'm using my palette knife. I'm going to take that right to the edge. That's different than what's happening here. And so I'm going to pull right to the edge here. Palette knife is cool to use because you can make different marks with it. And then I'm just going to tell you my thought process as I riff and sort of play with this, okay? So not every single thing needs to contrast. These are both bright colors, although now the yellow is the brighter, more saturated color in contrast to the blue, because the colors are reactive. When you bring one next to each other, to another, it changes how they feel. But I don't have to contrast every single thing. I can create contrast without doing the opposite of everything, right? So this is kind of cool. I like this happening in here. So I'm going to actually take that further. Actually, I'm going to do this. It's kind of cool. And actually, I think I'm going to just straight up do this. But I think I'm going to leave a little bit of space down here, some of that white space. So I haven't totally gotten rid of my shape, although I'm definitely now starting to create this like as a focal point more because I've covered up some of this. And now just because I want to bring in some pencil. This curvy stuff is neat, but I want to play against it with lines, with things that are a little more rigid. I'm gonna go right over. So my marks are not all loopy. They're not curvy like the rest of this piece. I think I want to keep some of this space open. Let these marks come all the way down. I like how some of the marks are lifting a little bit here. Like I'm putting down the mark, but I'm also lifting some of the mark. Now I feel a little bit like these shapes inside of this blue shape are almost like windows or portals. That's kind of neat. I want to play around with it and see what happens if I turn it to its side. And what happens if I scrape some of this? I worry a little bit that I've lost some of the shape here. So let me get this brush. Maybe bring a little bit of that back. I'm going to just pull that down. And I'm not totally sure what I'm doing here. That's kind of the beauty of making, one of the great things about making abstract art. Let's bring some black in here. Of I've got all this brightness up top. Let's bring some darkness in. Let's invite Darth Vader to the party. Maybe he's a little bit too much. Let's scrape him back a little bit. Really put him back. Now, what I have here is, in my mind, not quite enough contrast in size. I've got like about half, a little more than half of the piece is kind of this part of the shape, and almost the same amount is up here. And to me, that's uncomfortable. So I'm going to cut it. I'm just going to cut that doggy down. Kind of a cool little tidbit. Put that over there. And now I've got some contrast now in my value. I've got some lighter value and darker value. When I squint my eyes, I can see I've got this contrast, right? And I've got some contrast to this loopy shape with my like lines and with my straight lines, but I think I want just a little more. I want to bring in some hints of color. Bring in some of this red. This is just colored pencil. Let's put it back. So I've created different marks that are different from that curvy, kind of soft, happy, bouncy feel of this piece. And I feel like I've made it more interesting by bringing in some variety, right? Contrast is also like bringing in variety, contrasting against what's already there. So now my shapes, I feel like are all a little bit of the same. I don't want to say the same size. They're not exactly the same size, but I think I want to introduce just a little bit something different. So I'm going to make some little marks that the viewer could discover as they got closer to the leaves. Most things, in my humble opinion, benefit from a little bit of neon. So let's put a little neon in it. Let's get our pencil sharpener. Put a little bit of neon in it, a little unexpected color. A little bit of white. Make some little lines. What I want is if I can make little things, little marks, then I have a chance of making this blue mark feel bigger and I get contrast in size, which I would like to. Let's see, and I think it just needs some little. No, little bits. Maybe I just like to fiddle a little bit. Here is, I'm going to call it finished for now. Let's look at where we started. I got a lot of paint on that way. This is where I started. Okay, so soft, kind of like bouncy, loopy, bright colors, a lot of white space, and I contrasted that with some darkness. I made it not the darkest value. I took away some of that white space. I made this piece, instead of feeling isolated, I kept the curve of it, but I played against it with straighter lines, and then I created variety in the size. I contrasted the size of that shape by bringing in little bitty bits that add variety. Now, when someone looks at it from here, they might be intrigued, but when they get closer, they'll see like, oh, little tiny things that might feel sort of interesting to them. So in playing around with contrast, I used the concept of contrast to like give me some direction about how to work on the piece, right? And I think it was really helpful. Let's just review the steps. Really helpful to look at the shape you've been given or the marks you've been given, describe them, write it down. If you just describe them in your head, that's totally, wholly different than like thinking and directing your hand to write down what you're thinking is a different enterprise altogether. I guarantee that you will observe more when you write things down. And then that starts to give you ideas about how to jump and move against the shape. So you can take yours as far as like this. I've got multiple layers on here. And even when the paint wasn't dry, I got in there with like color pencils and stuff anyway. Sometimes you get really cool marks like that. Or you can just make some shapes to contrast the marks that you've been given. Either way is perfectly acceptable. And I think a really valuable tool for expanding your mark making abilities and expanding the moves you have when you make abstract art. So one final thing is this. I think this is the last part, and I think this is very important. I'm going to take this original piece. This is my copy. Obviously, you might not have access to a colored copier or a printer that can copy for you. And in that case, just take a picture with your phone, just so you can refer to it. I'm not worried about cutting it out super duper easily. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to glue it down in my book. Just using a glue stick. Glue that down in my book. This piece, I've got to wait for it to dry. It'll probably be dry in about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to glue it here. And maybe most importantly, not always, but it is important, note down the date, right? It's November 7th, 2024. You'd be surprised when you go back and look in your books how important it can feel to know when you made something, okay? I wish you luck with yours. I can't wait to see what y'all make. I think they're going to be awesome. If you feel discouraged at any point in the process, just press on or pick a new mark and play with that one. If you feel like you're beating your head against a wall when you're making abstract art, ooh, you gotta stop. Stop, do something else, go for a walk, change it up, work on a different piece. It's not something that needs to be forced. And I'll see y'all later. Thanks. Bye.